Okay, vocabulary. When you're studying a language, how much time should you spend studying vocabulary? It's obvious that you need some amount of vocabulary in studying your language, just as a starting block. But I think that vocabulary learning is very overrated. It's not actually very effective at all. I'm going to explain to you why. So, first of all, if you're just starting out in a language, I think it's quite helpful to memorize some vocabulary. If you enjoy studying the language in that way, just having a vocab sheet, it's quite exciting to first discover like what words mean in a certain language. So I'm all for that. However, I think there comes a point where the novelty of the vocabulary wears off, and with that novelty wearing off, so wears off your ability to memorize words, because it's not new and exciting anymore. In my experience, in order to learn what words mean effectively, you need that degree of novelty to keep you going. And then the second more important point is that when it comes to learning vocabulary, it's just so much to do that could be spent elsewhere. So I'm sure you've seen those videos where it's like, learn 90% of all Spanish in 2 seconds, and it's like a video of all the basic words in the language. And it's a fact that all languages have a pool of about 50 or so words that are always present. Words like I, you, is, this. And if you memorize those words, you will recognise a lot of Latin, a lot of Spanish, it's very true, or whatever the language is. The problem comes when you are getting to the point. The problem comes is that despite that doesn't mean the next 50 words that you learn will be as useful. There's quite an exponential graph of how useful the words you learn are, because there's such a huge pool of words you need to complete to just memorize them all effectively. And the second thing is, well, this is really the crux of the issue really, is you don't really learn stuff about a language outside of a context. So I firmly believe that the way the human brain learns language is all should be completely contextualized. So if you see a word that you don't recognise in your native language, maybe the first time you're like, what the fuck does that mean? But as you read more and on that subject where that word comes up, you might have had this experience where it suddenly starts to make sense. And then you don't need to go look it up. And in the grand scheme of things, on a much slower scale, this is how we acquire foreign vocabulary in foreign languages as well. So, for example, so what do I recommend? What am I doing? How much vocab do I learn? Well, I'm quite radical in my approach. So at the moment, what I do is I'm studying Latin at the moment. and I just take out. Got a few books from a library in Latin. I prefer books over just like online resources, because your mind's so much more focused on the reading. But that's by the by. And I just sit down and read. And the aim is just to get through as many books as I can. And a lot of the words I don't recognise at all. But I get a familiarity with where they're used. And over time, my brain will recognise them. Because I've already learned that basic pool of Latin words, I don't see it necessary to fill in the details by acts of learning. My hope is that context will fill it in. Now, we'll see how it goes. I think one of the big problems about my approach to Latin is that I'm not listening to content, so my ability to comprehend things indirectly is much harder when you're reading it as opposed to listening or maybe even watching something. If you're watching something in a language, you can make out what things mean very easily because you've got the visual cue. There's no such cue in writing at all. So we'll see how far I get with the strategy. And it might just be that it's too big a distance to fill, too big a gap to fill. But I'm strangely optimistic about my ability to learn Latin in that way. So, like and subscribe if you enjoy my contents, and God bless.